Once you free your mind about the concept of harmony and of music being correct, you can do whatever you want. And welcome to another devlog of Professor Bubbles. Now, quite some time between the last devlog and this devlog, the only thing I had in mind was that epic introduction you just saw. And that sentence is, of course, a part of a famous Daft Punk song called Giorgio by Moroder. To my mind, that song is all about artistic freedom. Now, when I think about artistic freedom in game development and in games, it means to me that all the new games will be interesting, exciting, and maybe even surprising. So with that in mind, today I would like to show you bits and pieces of Professor Bubbles where I have used the creative energy. So let's have a look. So one of the first things I designed in the game were the two-level teams, from which this one right here is what I call the jam level. I mean, it's kind of obvious because there is this jam in the background and the tiles look kind of fluid, and I also pixeled some of these dangerous yellow slimy tiles there too. Anyway, after the graphics were done, I decided to craft some enemies, and just like for most of the enemies in the game, I start by doodling in as a sprite. And one of the first sprites I made was this marmalade jar, and originally I think it was meant to be simple in the background, but then I got this idea to write a date on the jar to show that whatever is in the jar is very, very badly outdated. And then I remembered a gag from my student days which goes about like this. If you want to spare cleaning your fridge, just wait long enough and the food wanders away itself. So then I got this wild idea to formulate a marmalade torso in the jar, and so this is how the idea of the jam man was born. After pixeling, I wasn't exactly sure how to build such an enemy into the game because I couldn't think of anything interesting for an enemy which is contained in a jar. But then one day I went and pixeled this classical blob enemy, and as its movement animation is kind of fluid, I figured out I could combine the two enemies into one. And so what I did was these animations where the blob is morphing into a jam man and back. And all of a sudden the blob enemy got much more interesting because with its hands the jam man can do so much more than the blob alone. And here is an example of an attack sequence where the blob first morphs, then throws a ball of jam and finally morphs back to the blob shape. And now I think this sort of attack sequence is a bit of a surprise, as most of the blobs I've seen in other games use these melee kind of attacks instead of spawning a projectile. Now that I have given some thought what I'm going to say about the jam man entry in this video, I actually got some new ideas which could be done with this morphing concept. And this is by the way, one of the good reasons why to do devlogs in the first place. So one example would be to make the jamman morph out of those dangerous jam tiles. You know, it's a bit like the boo blocks or stretchers in Super Mario World, so the player would be maybe given an indication that there is a jamman about to jump out, and that way I could also make the jamman wander around stealthy in ceilings or walls. So, you know how it feels to die in a game just inches away from a finish line. I usually get that feeling while playing a Mario Maker 2 Kaizo Light levels, and it is surprising how fast I'm able to quit the game and send my Switch into a sleep mode. Well, as I have playtested the few levels I have made for Professor Bubbles, I think some of them are quite tricky sometimes. I mean, take a look at, for example, this part where the player is bombarded with a bunch of missiles. I mean, it's not too easy, I would say. And as the levels are relatively large, I decided to implement save point mechanics to the game. Now, there are different ways to go about save point indications, and I think this is where the game designers have had some freedom. Like in Hollow Knight, we have these benches. In Metroid, there are these stations, and in Celeste, as each room automatically has a save point, there is no need for indicators at all. So, now comes the big question. What did I choose for a save point? Well, dim the lights, please. Now the drum roll. Telephone. I mean, I think there is an entire generation knowing what happens if you answer a call from, let's say, a public telephone booth. The thing is, I'm not sure anymore if I actively thought of this Matrix style teleporting while I was thinking of different save point options. Actually, I thought the telephone would be a nice additional mini game where the player has to answer the phone, and through the line some unknown person would give the player a mission, like collect 5 cookies within a minute or something like that. But well, as usual, I did not touch that idea since pixeling that phone booth, but as I still kinda like it, maybe one day it will still become part of the game. But now back to the save point. The first thing I needed to do was to create an animation of the cat answering the phone, and here it is. And while this alone was not challenging enough, I decided to add some juice to it by creating this nice respawning animation. As I guess it's not too obvious that a telephone is a save point, I definitely need to create some tutorial label which pops up when the player is near the save point. Okay, so that's all I had in mind this time. I think the topic I discussed in today's video, which is the artistic freedom, is something we hobbyist game developers can take advantage of. And by this, I mean we are allowed to try all kinds of crazy things and ideas which might even one day push the boundaries of game genres. So I'm glad you followed my progress in Professor Bubbles this far. In next devlogs, I'm hoping for to present some isometric pixel art, which was quite difficult as I had practically no experience in it before. And well, that's it. I'm looking forward to see you in the follow-up devlogs very soon. So, bye bye.